My wife banned my family from meeting our baby. Our daughter was 3 weeks old when I realized my wife wasn't protecting our baby from my family. She was protecting herself from something that had happened years before we met. At first, I didn't understand that. All I knew was that my wife, Jessica, had decided that nobody from my side of the family was allowed to meet our daughter. Not my parents, not my sister, not my grandmother, nobody. And the strange part was that Jessica had never acted like this before our daughter was born. During the pregnancy, everything seemed normal. My mother had helped us prepare the nursery. My sister had bought a plane ticket months in advance because she wanted to be there when the baby arrived. My grandmother, who was 92, talked constantly about finally meeting her first great-granddaughter. Jessica had smiled whenever they talked about the baby. She even told my mother that she was excited for everyone to meet her. Then our daughter was born, and everything changed. Jessica's family was allowed into our home almost immediately. Her mother came over every day. Her father took hundreds of pictures. Her siblings dropped by whenever they wanted. One afternoon, I counted 15 people in our living room. They were laughing, passing the baby around, taking pictures and eating food that Jessica's mother had brought. But when my mother asked if she could come over for an hour, Jessica suddenly became upset. She said the baby was too young. She said there were too many germs. She said we needed to establish a routine. My mother offered to wear a mask. She offered to wash her hands before touching the baby. She even said she could stand outside the window if Jessica only wanted her to see the baby from a distance. Jessica still refused. I remember sitting at the kitchen table after that phone call. Why is my family the only problem? Jessica looked at me like I'd insulted her. Your family isn't the problem, then what is? She didn't answer. Instead, she picked up our daughter and walked into the nursery. I followed her. Jessica, my parents live 20 minutes away. Your mother is here almost every day. That's different. How? Because they're my family. I stared at her. I'm her father. Jessica's expression hardened. You don't understand what it's like to give birth. I knew the conversation was going nowhere, so I stopped arguing, at least temporarily. A few days later, my sister arrived from across the country. She had planned the trip months earlier. She had taken time off work. She booked a hotel because she didn't want to invade our space. She brought gifts for the baby and even made a little photo album. She was so excited that she called me from the airport. I'm finally here. I laughed. You're really going to make me cry. She laughed too. Then she asked the question I already knew was coming. When can I meet her? I didn't have an answer. I told her I'd talk to Jessica. Jessica said no. My sister waited. 1 day passed, then 2, then 3. Every time I asked Jessica, she had another excuse. The baby didn't sleep well. The baby was feeding. Jessica was exhausted. There were too many visitors. She needed privacy. Meanwhile, her own mother was still walking into our house every morning. My sister spent 4 days sitting in a hotel room waiting to meet her niece. On the 5th day, she flew home. She didn't yell. She didn't insult Jessica. She just hugged me at the airport and said she hoped things would get better. I watched her walk towards security carrying the baby gift she had never got to give. I felt ashamed, not because I had done anything wrong, but because I had allowed it to happen. Then came the incident with my grandmother. My grandmother had been looking forward to meeting the baby more than anyone. She had been asking me for pictures every day. She kept saying she wanted to hold her great-granddaughter while she was still strong enough to do it. Then one afternoon, my grandmother fell. She was taken to the hospital and told she needed surgery. She called me before going in. Her voice sounded weak. I don't want to bother you. You're not bothering me. I just wanted to see the baby. Jessica was standing in the kitchen when I answered. My grandmother continued. Even just a picture. If something happens during surgery, I want to have seen her. I looked at Jessica. Her face immediately changed. She walked toward me. Mom, I'll call you back. Jessica snatched the phone from my hand. My grandmother said something. Jessica's voice became angry. Stop trying to guilt trip us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jessica, she continued talking. You're making this about yourself. My grandmother was silent. Then Jessica hung up. I stared at her. What did you just do? She said my grandmother was manipulating her. She's 92 years old and going into surgery. Jessica rolled her eyes. That's exactly why she's using it. I felt something inside me break. That evening, Jessica's sister Amy found me alone in the kitchen. She looked nervous. Can we talk? Sure. She checked the hallway. Then she lowered her voice. You need to know why Jessica is doing this. I thought she was going to tell me Jessica was overwhelmed. Instead, Amy said something that completely changed the situation. This isn't about the baby. I stared at her. What do you mean? Jessica has been planning this for months. Planning what? How to keep your family away. I thought she was exaggerating. She wasn't. Amy told me that before our marriage, Jessica had been engaged to another man named Christopher. His mother had been extremely involved in their relationship. She had controlled wedding plans. She gave opinions about everything. The flowers, the guest list, the venue, the food, even where Jessica and Christopher should live. Eventually, Jessica became convinced that Christopher's mother was trying to control her life. The engagement ended. Jessica told her family that if she ever had children, no mother-in-law would ever have power over them. At the time, I thought that sounded understandable, but Amy told me it went much further than that. When Jessica became pregnant, she started talking about my family differently. She said my mother was going to become another version of Christopher's mother. She said she needed to establish boundaries before the baby was even born. Amy told me Jessica had spent specifically said she wanted my family to understand that the baby belonged to her, not us, her. Then Amy showed me messages. I read the first few. My hands started shaking. Jessica had been talking to friends about how she planned to make my family ask for permission to see the baby. She wanted them to beg. She wanted them to feel powerless. One message said she wanted my sister's trip to be a waste of money, so she'd learn not to assume she had a right to meet the baby. Another message talked about my mother. Jessica said my mother needed to learn her place. Then I saw the messages about my grandmother. I don't want to repeat everything she wrote, but she had mocked my grandmother's health. She called the hospital situation dramatic. She said older people used health problems to manipulate everyone. And then she wrote something about hoping my grandmother wouldn't live long enough to become attached to the baby. I couldn't breathe. Amy was crying. I didn't know she had written that until recently. I looked at her. Why are you showing me this? Because I'm tired of watching her hurt people. I confronted Jessica that night. She was sitting in the nursery. Our daughter was asleep in the crib. I placed the phone on the table. What's this? Jessica looked at the screen. Her face went white. Where did you get that? I didn't answer. She immediately stood up. Amy? I nodded. Jessica started shouting. She said Amy was jealous. She said her sister had betrayed her. She said the messages were private conversations and didn't mean anything. Then she accused me of choosing my family over her. I told her I was choosing my daughter. She started crying. I told her that wasn't enough anymore. I couldn't keep watching her punish innocent people because of something another woman had done years earlier. I packed a diaper bag. Jessica asked what I was doing. I'm taking our daughter to meet her grandparents. You're not taking her anywhere. I'm her father. She stepped in front of the door. You're not leaving with her. I didn't argue. I picked up the baby and walked out. Jessica called the police. I expected officers to arrive at my parents' house within minutes. When they did, they asked me what was happening. I explained that I was the baby's father. They asked whether there was a custody order. There wasn't. They told me that without a court order saying otherwise, this was a family dispute and not a kidnapping. Jessica's mother arrived shortly afterward. She was furious. She stood on my parents' porch screaming that I had stolen her granddaughter. My father started recording. She pointed at me. You are going to regret this. I said nothing. She told me Jessica was going to get full custody. She said I'd never see my daughter again. She said she'd make sure I only got supervised visits. My father kept recording. My mother was inside holding the baby. For the first time since the birth, she was smiling. My grandmother was there too. She had come home from the hospital after surgery. When she saw the baby, she started crying. She held her carefully. She touched her tiny fingers. I've waited so long for this. I had to turn away. I didn't want anyone to see me crying. We spent 3 peaceful days together. No arguments, no accusations, no one trying to control who could hold the baby. My grandmother sat in her chair and talked to her. My mother took pictures. My father held her against his chest. My sister joined us through a video call. For those 3 days, everything felt normal. Then I had to return home. I knew there would be consequences. I just didn't know how severe they would be. When I walked into our house, Jessica's entire family was there. Her father stood up immediately. You kidnapped the baby. I couldn't believe it. I looked at Jessica. She was crying. Her mother accused me of being dangerous. Her brother called me controlling. Everyone was shouting. I tried to explain. Nobody listened. Then I realized what Jessica had done. She had told them her version first. She had made me the villain, the unstable father, the dangerous husband, the man who had supposedly stolen his own child. Eventually, everyone left. Jessica and I were alone. She gave me an ultimatum. Apologize, tell my family you were wrong. Promise your family won't see the baby again without my permission, or we're finished. I looked at her. I won't apologize for letting my daughter meet her grandparents. She picked up the baby and locked herself in the bedroom. The next morning, the messages started. Her mother, her father, her sibling, friends, everyone demanded that I apologize. Then Jessica's mother started posting vague things online about protecting babies from dangerous people. My name wasn't mentioned, but everyone knew who she meant. I felt trapped. Even my coworkers started asking if everything was okay. Then Amy came to my workplace. She had her laptop with her. She showed me another group chat. This one was worse. Jessica had been discussing custody laws before the baby was even born. She had asked friends how to build a case showing I was unstable. She had been told to document everything I did, even small arguments. She had been collecting things out of context. Amy showed me months of conversations. Jessica had been planning this. This wasn't a reaction. It was a strategy. I took the evidence to a lawyer. His name was Samir. He reviewed everything carefully. Then he looked at me. You need to understand something. What? You have rights as the father. He explained that without a custody order, Jessica couldn't simply declare that I wasn't allowed to see my own child. He told me the messages could be extremely important, especially the ones showing that she had planned to create a narrative against me. He advised me to document everything. Every message, every missed visitation, every threat, every conversation. I went home that evening. Jessica had changed the locks on our bedroom and the nursery. Her mother was staying in the house. I wasn't allowed inside either room. I checked our bank accounts. Jessica had moved most of our shared money into accounts under her name. That was when I realized this wasn't just a marriage argument anymore. It was becoming a legal battle. My mother found a mediator. Jessica agreed to attend. The meeting lasted less than an hour. Her mother dominated the entire conversation. She answered questions for Jessica. She rejected every compromise. My parents offered supervised visit. They offered short visit. They offered to meet at neutral location. Nothing was acceptable. Finally, the mediator asked Jessica what she wanted. Jessica said she didn't trust my family. The mediator asked what they had done. Jessica couldn't provide an answer. 2 days later, I was served at work. Jessica had filed for emergency custody. The petition claimed I had kidnapped our daughter. It described me as unstable, threatening, controlling, dangerous. I read it twice. Almost none of it was true, but I knew how it would look on paper. I immediately called Samir. The emergency hearing was 5 days away. We had to prepare quickly. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Jessica sat on the other side with her lawyer. Her mother sat behind her. The judge entered. Jessica's lawyer presented her as a frightened new mother. They talked about postpartum stress. They talked about the baby being vulnerable. They said Jessica was afraid of me. Then Samir stood. He presented the evidence. First, the messages. Then the video from my father's phone. Then the documentation showing that Jessica had repeatedly prevented my family from seeing the child while allowing her own family unlimited access. The judge read through the messages. Her expression changed. She stopped. She looked at Jessica. "Did you write this?" Jessica said she didn't remember. The judge continued reading. She found the messages where Jessica talked about making my family beg. Then she found the comments about my grandmother. The courtroom became completely silent. Jessica's lawyer tried to argue that the messages were private. The judge interrupted. "Private messages can still be evidence." She continued reading. Then she asked Jessica a question. "Why did you tell the court your husband was dangerous when these messages show you had been planning to restrict his family before the baby was born?" Jessica had no answer. The judge denied the emergency custody request. Then she established a temporary schedule. 3 days with me, 3 days with Jessica. The judge warned both of us that the schedule was mandatory. She also ordered counseling. As we left the courtroom, Jessica was crying. Her mother was furious. I was simply exhausted. 3 days later, we attended our first counseling session. The therapist, Wilhelmina, didn't allow Jessica's mother into the room. Jessica immediately began talking about how difficult childbirth had been, how exhausted she was, how nobody understood what she had gone through. Wilhelmina listened. Then she asked about the messages. Jessica's entire personality changed. She said the messages were taken out of context. Wilhelmina asked what context could justify intentionally keeping grandparents away from their grandchild. Jessica became angry. She accused the therapist of being biased. Wilhelmina calmly told her that she wasn't judging her. She was trying to understand her behavior. Jessica stopped talking. The next week, something unexpected happened. Amy called me. Her voice was shaking. Jessica's mother had visited her apartment. She had brought cash, $2,000. She wanted Amy to tell the court that she had fabricated the messages. Amy refused. Then Jessica's mother threatened to cut her off from the family. Amy recorded the entire conversation. She sent it to me. I gave it to Samir. Now we had evidence that someone was trying to influence a witness. The next major test came during my first 3-day custody period. I picked up my daughter. She looked so small. I drove directly to my grandmother's house. My family was waiting. My grandmother held her again. This time she smiled. My sister cried. My mother took pictures. Nobody fought. Nobody argued. Nobody tried to control anything. The baby was simply surrounded by people who loved her. When the 3 days were over, I returned her to Jessica. She was late, very late. The court order required a specific exchange time. Jessica wasn't there. Her mother told me they weren't ready. I called Samir. He told me to document everything. Eventually, the police arrived. They explained to Jessica that a court order wasn't optional. The exchange happened. After that, Jessica began taking counseling seriously. At first, she fought everything. Then something changed. Her therapist helped her understand that she had taken the fear and anger from her previous relationship and transferred it onto my family. She had spent years being angry at Christopher's mother. But instead of setting healthy boundaries with my family, she had tried to control everything. She had become the person she hated. The realization didn't happen overnight, but eventually, she admitted it. One rainy evening, Jessica asked me to meet her privately. We sat in her car. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Then she started crying. I was scared. I asked what she was scared of, losing control. She told me what had happened with Christopher. His mother had taken over their wedding. She had made decisions without asking Jessica. She had treated Jessica like an outsider. When the engagement ended, Jessica promised herself she'd never allow another woman to control her life. Then she saw my mother's excitement about the baby. And instead of seeing a loving grandmother, she saw Christopher's mother all over again. She panicked. Then she built a plan to make sure nobody could take control away from her, even if it meant taking control away from me. I told her I understood why she was afraid, but understanding wasn't forgiveness. She had hurt my parents. She had humiliated my sister. She had terrified my grandmother. She had tried to turn me into a criminal, and she had used our daughter as leverage. I told her I didn't know whether our marriage could survive. She nodded. I don't know either. 6 weeks later, we returned to court for the full custody hearing. This time, both sides had complete evidence. Jessica's lawyer argued that the baby needed stability. Samir argued that stability meant having a healthy relationship with both parents and both families. The therapist's report was important. It explained Jessica's progress, but it also documented her previous behavior. The judge reviewed everything. Then she issued the final arrangement. We would share custody equally. Our daughter would spend alternating weeks with each parent. During each parent's custody time, their family could visit without requiring permission from the other parent. There would be boundaries. Everyone would call before visiting. Nobody could simply show up. Nobody could use the baby to punish another family member. Jessica cried, but this time she didn't argue. She simply nodded. The marriage was over, but the war was finally ending. Months later, Jessica called me. She apologized. Not the kind of apology where someone says sorry but immediately explains why it wasn't their fault. A real apology. She said she was sorry for what she'd done. She said she had been wrong. She said she had allowed her fear to control her. She said she had treated my family unfairly, and she apologized specifically to my grandmother. That meant more to me than she probably realized. Eventually, both families met with the therapist. We created a visitation schedule. My parents would visit during my custody week. Jessica's parents would visit during hers. Everyone would call ahead. Everyone would respect the other parent's time. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair. fair. My daughter began growing up surrounded by both families. My mother became obsessed with buying tiny clothes. My father taught her to grab his glasses. My sister video called every Sunday. My grandmother visited whenever she could. She would sit in her chair and talk to the baby for hours. 6 months after everything began, I moved into my own apartment. Jessica lived 15 minutes away. We exchanged our daughter every Sunday evening. The handoffs were usually quiet. Sometimes we talked about feeding schedules, sometimes about doctor's appointments, sometimes about nothing at all. Our marriage hadn't survived. And for a long time, I felt guilty about that. I had imagined my daughter growing up with both parents under one roof. I had imagined family dinners, birthdays, Christmas mornings, school events. But eventually, I realized something. A broken marriage doesn't automatically mean a broken family. My daughter had 2 homes, but she also had 2 families who loved her. My mother and Jessica's mother weren't friends. They probably never would be, but they learned to respect each other's boundaries. My father and Jessica's father rarely spoke, but they could stand in the same room for their granddaughter. And my grandmother, she got to see her great-granddaughter. That was what mattered most. One Sunday afternoon, I watched my daughter sitting on my grandmother's lap. My grandmother was telling her a story about my father when he was a little boy. My daughter was too young to understand the story, but she was smiling. I looked around the room. My parents, my sister, my daughter. And for a moment, I thought about everything that had happened. The argument, the accusations, the police, the lawyer, the courtroom, the messages, the betrayal, the tears, all because one person had been terrified of losing control. Jessica had believed that keeping my family away would protect her. Instead, it nearly destroyed our marriage. It nearly damaged relationships that could never have been replaced. And it taught me something I never expected to learn. Sometimes people don't fight against the people who hurt them. Sometimes they fight against the people who remind them of the people who hurt them. Jessica had been hurt by someone else years before I ever met her. But instead of healing from it, she carried that fear into our marriage. And when our daughter was born, she used that fear to justify controlling everyone around her. I don't hate her anymore. I don't trust her the way I once did. That trust probably won't ever completely return. But I can respect the progress she's made. She goes to therapy. She follows the custody order. She no longer tries to control who our daughter sees. And most importantly, she stopped using our daughter as a weapon. My daughter will grow up knowing that both sides of her family love her. She'll know her grandmother's stories. She'll know her aunt's jokes. She'll know her grandfather's terrible attempts at dancing. She'll know her mother's family too. And someday, when she's old enough to understand what happened, I'll tell her the truth. Not the angry version. Not the version where her mother is the villain. I'll tell her that 2 adults were scared. One handled that fear badly. The other fought back. And eventually, both learned that their daughter deserved better than being caught in the middle. Because that's the part I keep coming back to. My wife thought she was protecting our baby. I thought I was protecting my family. But our daughter never needed us to choose sides. She needed us to stop making her the reason for the fight. And 6 months later, when I watched my grandmother hold her and smile, I finally understood that winning the custody battle was never the real victory. The real victory was that my daughter would grow up knowing she was loved by everyone. Not just by one side. Not just by one family. By all of us. And sometimes, after everything falls apart, that's the closest thing to a happy ending you can get.
Thanks for watching.